Hey guys, Stealth here. So what the hell is this? Yeah, it's Red Dragon. I've been playing a bit of the new active aggression game and honestly I don't like it that much. It just, I don't know, it doesn't appeal to me that much. Wargame Red Dragon though does keep dragging me back every now and then. So a couple weeks back I played the Second Korean War again. It was nice. It was nice to be back at Red Dragon. So I know I'm zigzagging a lot with this channel, covering World of Warships, covering Red Dragon, covering active aggression, some other games here and there. I'm not quite sure where I want to go yet. Besides that, I have a full-time business that I'm running, so I might not always have the time to create new videos for you guys. When I started my channel, I did have that time, and situations have changed, so that's why I haven't been posting quite as much lately as I used to. Anyway, video for today is a quick deck review from a deck that was sent in by Matthias. It's a British heavy armor deck. I'm not exactly sure what it's to be used for, because he didn't specify that in the description of the deck, but let's just have a quick look. Let's assume that this deck is to be used in a situation, say from a 4v4 to a 10v10. So a big map where an armored division can do relatively well. Starting with the logistics, I think that 2 FOBs is a bit much. Depending on the size of the map, I'd say take 1 FOB and multiple logistics units, or no FOB at all, because you don't always need one. If you want to play a highly mobile deck and don't want to get bogged down by having to fly helicopters back and forth to your FOB, you can always go with just the Chinooks and the Stalwarts. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take 1 FOB because some of these weaponries, or some of the weapons used by these units are very expensive. And I'm going to take another Chinook. So now we have a FOB, 7 rovers, 12 Stalwarts and 14 Chinooks. The Stalwarts, if you want to, you can change those to a armored vehicle, like the Warrior, which has a bit of armor, or the Chieftain, which has a lot of frontal armor. The thing is, though, it's terribly at off-roading. It's terrible at off-roading, sorry. 45 kilometer speed means that this thing is going to be crawling off-road. But on the other hand, you got 14 frontal armor, so yeah. Depends on what you're going to use it for. Let's just keep it at that. Because it is a good unit. It is a good tank. It does have good accuracy. But it's not a frontline unit. But on the other hand, if you're in a heavily contested area, this might just be the command unit for you. Now I'm going to first look at the tanks, because that is what a British heavy armor deck does. It focuses on tanks, so everything else should be supporting these tanks. Let's have a look. He has 53 tanks in here. Let's start out with the heaviest. 2 Challenger Mark IIs. These are the pride and glory of the British Army, and these tanks are the ones that you absolutely have to have in there. 23 frontal armor, a ton of armor penetration, high accuracy, very good off-road speed. Definitely one you should take. They're expensive though, 170 points, and you only get 2. Do not lose these things. Then he has 4 Challenger 1 Mark IIIs and 2 more at Elite. Depending on how well you're going to play your tanks, you may not need this many. What I would do is have my Challenger 2s as a base force. So this is going to be pretty much the main punch of my army. The Challenger 1 Mark IIIs, which I want to get 4 of, will be a sort of support for the Challenger 2. So I'm going to take 2 more at Elite, gives me 4 Challenger 1 Mark IIIs. Then 8 Challenger 1 Mark IIs as backup should do. And altogether this is going to be a very, very expensive force. So the rest of the tanks should be a bit cheaper. 115 is definitely cheaper, but I'm looking for something more along the range of 100 points. And unfortunately that is not something that the British offer. They got 115 or 85. And that means that you have to make a choice whether you're going to go for more expensive high-end Challengers or a little bit lower-end Chieftain Mark 11. The difference real quick between these tanks is a lot more armor. 5 points of armor. Armor penetration is better on the Chieftain. Accuracy is better on the Chieftain, although the Challenger has better moving accuracy. And of course, this one has better off-road speed at 55 versus 45. And again, 45 off-road speed for a tank is terrible, because it's exactly what a tank is supposed to do. Go off-road. I'm sorry, but those things are meant to go into the wilderness where their tracks do all the work. So it kind of defeats the purpose of having a Challenger Mark 11. On the other hand, if these things are supporting the Challenger Mark 2s, Mark 3s and the Challenger 2s, then we might not need the Challenger Mark 1. So I'm going to delete these, and let's see, he has 8 of those at Elite. That should be well enough. Especially, let's see, these Chieftain Mark 2s, we don't really need these. These, for 35 points, aren't bad. They got a decent bit of accuracy, decent bit of armor penetration, and a decent bit of armor, but again, their off-road speed is terrible. This is even worse at only 40 instead of 45. Let's see, the Mark 10. Mark 10 versus Mark 11 saves you 20 points, and the armor is the same, it's just that it has a bit less range than the Mark 11, and it has a bit less armor penetration. But the Chieftain Mark 10 as a sort of roadblock tank might just work. So I'm going to delete the Mark 2, add the Mark 10, and I save myself 2 points. I might fill these guys up later, but I'm not sure yet, we'll see. Moving on to infantry. Again, these guys should be units that support my other force, my main force, which are the tanks. So what I want these guys to do is either capture terrain, operate in the woods, which is a very, very unsafe place for my tanks to go, or have them capture terrain and hold terrain so that my tanks can push up. Now, these FE510 Warrior Milans are really nice vehicles. They got a lot of frontal armor at 6, side armor at 5 is extremely heavily armored for a personnel carrier like this, or an infantry fighting vehicle. The Rarden is a decent autocannon, but the problem is that it's not stabilized. This thing cannot fire on the move. And that does limit their capability, because you want to have these things quickly drop off infantry and preferably support the infantry as they are pushing up. So you got your infantry moving up, you got your vehicles moving up, but the 510s cannot move up and fire at the same time. So you're going to have to make a choice. And that's, as far as I'm concerned, not really worth that 25 points for the Milan. The Milan missile itself is okay, but at 2450 range and with a 40% accuracy is not that good. So what I want to do is delete one of these groups and get them in a cheaper vehicle, because now I'm paying 40 points for the infantry, the Fusiliers 90 and the vehicle. I think that's too much, because while the Fusiliers 90 are definitely good, you don't really need to have this many of the expensive vehicles. So I can make a choice. I can go for 20 points or 30 points. 20 points, this is going to do quite well for me, for my needs, because I want these guys to quickly capture a forest or a building, say a block of buildings that I have already captured. I want them to hold it and just have him there as a skeleton force, say 1 or 2 groups. And building a force up for only 20 or 40 points is well enough. So we're going to take 14 of those. Still gives me a ton of infantry, and actually way too many. So I'm also going to throw out one more, actually, let's see, the Warrior Milan. I'm going to throw out this group. This way I got 24 groups of infantry, and that should be plenty. What I do need to pay attention to is anti-air, because if there's one thing that can ruin a tank push, it's a lot of helicopters and airplanes. So I need to be able to defend my forces against that. Now, infantry is an okay way to do it, but you're going to need a lot more in the sense of moving support, because tanks will be moving at 50 to 60 kph off-road and infantry at 20, so they're going to be lagging behind rather far. And that's for the regular infantry. Javelins and blowpipes only travel at 15 kph. So what I want to do is not take the blowpipes. I don't really need those. I can take one group of javelins, because they can do the job of defending or supporting this group of infantry. And I might as well bring a second one, because 7 of them might get wiped out by, say, an overflying B5, which drops one of those semi-nuclear bombs. So this is it for me for the infantry. Support-wise, let's see. Everything has to be geared towards my tanks pushing up or my tanks being defended. So the smokes, which can be produced from the mortar carriers, are definitely a welcome addition to this force. I just don't need them at hardened. I want to get these guys at trained to make sure I can disperse my smoke as far as possible. Then he has tracked rapier FSAs. You got both the rapier FSA and the base rapier. Difference is this one's geared towards helicopter warfare, this one toward planes. They each have their own role. The transport or the vehicle is exactly the same. So it's just a question of what kind of target are you looking at. Is it a helicopter, at which you need the tracked rapier, or the base rapier, or the FSA for anti-air longer range at 3.5 clicks. These things are decent at pushing up, and the problem that the British deck has is that this is pretty much the only option that you have. Because we already depleted the Chieftain Marksman and the Challenger Marksman. There's as many of those in here as possible, which is only one card. And the Falcons really aren't that good. If you compare the Falcon, let's see, the Falcon to the tracked rapier, you're going to see that it has a bit less range, 2625 versus 2800 on the rapier. It has a lot less accuracy. Of course, it does fire faster, and you only pay 10 points less for them. So in this case, there's not really a right answer. It depends on your preference. They are both not radar guided, so you don't have to worry about seaplanes in either of them. But the Falcon is a bit faster off-road, 45 versus 35. And as far as ammunition goes, I'm not too sure. I've never really tested these things side by side. So I'm not sure which one is going to run out of ammo faster. One thing that I have noticed though is that the rapiers tend to miss more than they hit. I'm not sure if this 50% is actually accurate, but we're just going to have to go with it. So, long story short, we're keeping both of these in at the maximum amount of them at 7. I'm going to be deploying them in groups of 2. Then, Challenger Marksman. I don't want to get these upgraded or upvetted. I want them at trained. And the Chieftain Marksmans. Let's say I already got 5 of these. We're going to upvet these to 5, so we're going to stick to what he has. These guys, along with the Challenger Marksman, are really, really hard to kill AA units. This is, I believe, one of the few units in the game, as far as an AA unit goes, that can successfully survive an anti-radar missile, so a seed missile. That makes it exceptional. And it can also survive a anti-tank round, or a tank round to the face, with 15 or 11 frontal armor. Your vehicle will take damage, your vehicle will panic, but it will be surviving, and that's the most important thing here. So, we're going to be sticking to this group. So, I've done logistics, infantry, support, tanks. Time for reconnaissance. Reconnaissance for a British armored deck it's not ideal. You have the scimitars and the Spartans, and both of them are not really heavily armored or heavily armed, and they cannot fire on the move. The scimitar does not have a stabilizer, and that's a problem, because a scout is supposed to be moving. It's supposed to be looking for targets for those tanks, and if the target happens to be infantry, I want these units to be able to engage them. They can't. They don't have a stabilizer, and I don't want them to sit still, because a target that's sitting still is a bigger target and an easier target to hit. So the scimitar really isn't that good of an option. The Scorpion, which is the same vehicle, just a different weapon system, it's the Rarden versus the L23A1, has the same problem, no stabilizer. Then you have the Spartan, which does have a stabilizer, but it has the wrong weapon. This is just a medium machine gun, not even a heavy machine gun. Low range, low accuracy, terrible stabilizer, low rate of fire really for a machine gun, some armor, but it does have high off-road speed and it has very good optics. And this is pretty much what I consider a semi-throwaway reconnaissance unit. And I'm saying semi because you don't get that many units per card. But they are dirt cheap. They are 25 points. The Scimitar, even cheaper, only carries good optics. And what I want to have is very good optics. So what I'm going to do here is get one card of 7 Spartans. I know that you get a bit more capacity to spot and identify enemy units, but it's going to work out with 7. Next up, he has green jackets in a Pinsgauer. This is not really something that I approve of, and the reason for that is that I want my green jackets, I want my Reconnaissance Infantry to be deployed quickly, and preferably to locations where they are not expected. The Pinsgauer means that you have to stick to the road, or if you're going off-roading, this thing has an off-road speed of 50, which is rather bad. So instead, we're going to not take the Pinsgauer, we're going to take the Puma HC-1, which is a pretty good helicopter. It's okay in speed at 250, medium size, poor optics. I mean, it's just a transport. I know I still have 2 points. I might spend those elsewhere, or I have 5 points actually by now. I might spend those elsewhere, not sure yet. I'm going to revisit all the categories after I spend everything here. And talking about points that I want to spend, I want to get this unit, the Centurion AVRE, our advanced, what was it again, Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers, if I believe. And that is a very, very heavily armed vehicle, in the sense that it carries this main gun, which fires 165mm HE rounds. If you are dealing with infantry, then this thing will settle it once and for all. Your base tanks aren't that good at them, because they only have an HE of 4. And you want these guys to be taking out transports or tanks. You want to have these guys engage the bad guys, the heaviest of the heaviest that the other units might not be able to do. So we're going to take one card of AVREs, take them at hardened to give them a bit more accuracy, because 25% is pretty terrible. Something that you have to keep in mind about this unit is its off-road speed, and at 35 it's terrible. So whatever you do, keep these things on the road to make sure that you don't have to wait a half hour before they can get moving again. Keep them on the road, keep them close to your friendlies or to your own force, and use them to very, very quickly get rid of enemy infantry. So one card of those. The other options that we have are the Striker or the Rarden. You heard my rant about the Rarden, no stabilizer, so this thing does not get a place in my deck. ATGM launcher of the Striker. The Striker itself is an okay transport. It has 70 kph off-road, 110 on-road of course, it's tracked. It has a bit of armor but not enough to take a tank shell. Its rounds are moderately fast, but the real problem is its low accuracy at 45%. Now for a tank, for example, I wouldn't be so concerned about this accuracy because a tank can fire pretty fast. And a tank can take a hit as it is taking return fire. This thing cannot take a hit, so I'm not taking the Striker. Helicopter-wise, you always want to have some helicopters because they can make an excellent stopgap force. They are really good at intercepting enemy tank columns, where your own columns will need to travel usually pretty far and not too fast. Now, since that's what the role for these units is going to be, I want them to have a moderate to high armor penetration punch. And for that I'm going to use the TOW2s. The TOW2s also give you another advantage, which is that they have a 50% stabilizer. So as they're zipping by at 320 kph, they can actually fire that missile. And they have a reasonably good chance to hit. You do want to have a fob if you want to use these units, because TOW2s are really resource intensive units. They are not as bad as Hellfires, but they're not far off. So keep in mind that these units will need some babysitting after they've been depleted, because they have to fly back to your fob or to a resupply unit, get resupplied before you can use them again. Let's take 7 of those. That should be enough. Sorry, the TOW2 version, of course. And since those already have a high accuracy, I'm going to take 7. Now, depending on how aggressive you like to play, you can go for the Lynx AH-7 20mm. This is a helicopter that's armed with these twin autocannons, and these twin autocannons are pretty good at taking out enemy infantry. So, by adding this one to the deck, I now have the choice of going for either the AVRE or for a closer, because it has less range, a closer support unit in the form of the AH-7. This one has a range of 1575. This one has a range of 2450. The difference is, of course, the agility of the AH-7, which is very, very nice. 320 kilometer speed, all road or everywhere, depending on how you want to call that, versus 35. And that's why it's such a flexible unit, and that's why I'm going to take it. Now, air power. Air power is something that is, again, in my vision, a supporting unit to the tanks. Because the tanks are the main punch of this deck. They're the specialty, they're the highest elite units of your deck. So these guys shouldn't really form their own offensive force with their aircraft. They should be used to support. And that's why you want to make sure you can take pretty well control of the skies, because otherwise you might be facing enemy aircraft with high-end HEGMs, which will take down those Challenger 2s pretty quickly, sometimes just in one salvo. So going with 2 Eurofighter Typhoons is not a bad idea. Next up, he has the Harrier Fa2, which is the seed plane. Decent range, 4.9 clicks. It will mean that I believe that it's going to get slightly in range of one of the AA units. I'm a bit rusty on all the stats since I haven't played for a while. But I think it can stay just outside the range. It has 40% ECM, which means that it will defend itself from missiles pretty well. And with a high accuracy, this thing is pretty much guaranteed to hit. So we're going to keep this in here to make sure I can actually deploy the Eurofighters. Next up, he has the GR5 and the GR1. Now it's the Harrier GR5 and the Tornado GR1. They have different roles. The Tornado GR1 is a cluster bomber, and it's good at fighting vehicles. It drops these cluster bombs, which you can see hiding here under the main airframe, with an AP power of 8. And this armor penetration is attacking the top side of any vehicle that it hits. So it's not going to try to get through, say, 20 frontal armor. It attacks the weak, soft part of an enemy tank. And that makes them useful, but at the same time, I think that my own tanks have already done this, or that they can already take care of any enemy tank pretty quickly. And since my tanks are already there, I don't want to have to spend another 130 points on getting a Tornado GR1 in here. So that's the reason why I'm not going to go with a GR1. The GR5, this is pretty much an HE bomber. That's all it is. It is, however, a relatively advanced HE bomber in the sense that it has 40% ECM and very good air detection, as well as an AIM-9L. So this can actually do some dogfighting. It's not great at it, but it will usually survive. And with 4 500 kilogram bombs, you can quickly kill off any enemy infantry which is either hiding in a building or which is out in the open. The thing is, I still consider these bomb trucks, and that's why I'm going to take 2 at rookie. I don't need them to be incredibly accurate or have faster morale recovery. If you mind these aircraft, if you mind your route that you're coming in on, 2 rookies should do. Now that leaves me 1 card here, or some more points on other categories. As far as situation is now, I'm pretty happy with the categories as they are. The one unit that I could consider is another unit in Reconnaissance, which would be another Spartan, because right now I don't have that many recons. But let's see what we can get from the air. We can use a tank sniper, but again, our tanks can do the same job. You can go with the Harrier GR7, which has the Paveway 2, which is a very, very precise bomb, but it doesn't really offer anything to support my tanks. Harrier FRS-1, dedicated air superiority fighters. Same for the Tornado 2 and the 3, and the Tornado GR1 I already discussed. That means I'm not going to be spending more points in air. Instead, I'm going to take another card of Spartans to make sure I have enough of those. Let's go with 5 at Hardened, and this gives me 12 reconnaissance units here, which should be enough. By the way, I completely skipped over the Gazelle AH-1, but it's a nice helicopter to have in here. It's the only recon helicopter that you get. Does have exceptional optics, no armaments, nothing in the sense of weaponry. It has only 4 hit points, and that means that this thing will be shot down by pretty much anything except for the weakest AA infantry. So keep that in mind. Now let's have a look at the deck in general. I have 4 points left, which means I can spend them either for, say, 2 more tanks and a bit more vehicles. But in vehicles I don't want anything, so we can just forget about this category. Helicopters, not that interesting, because we already have the links. I already got plenty of tanks, although 30 might be increased a bit. So what I could do is get another reconnaissance unit and another tank, and that's what I'm going to do, because reconnaissance is extremely important. These tanks may have the biggest and best guns in the game, but if they don't have anything to spot for them, you're screwed, and you have a 170 points decoration unit. So what I'm going to do is change this up. I'm going to add another Spartan to make sure that I have a sort of passive scouts for 25 points. And I'm going to take these Scorpions. Let's say 10 AP power or 2 AG. Their accuracy is both equally terrible. But this thing fires at least a bit faster and might panic the enemy units. So we're going to take 10 of those. Then we're going to throw in one more tank. And that is going to be, let's see, the Challenger Mark 1. Why not? 5 elite units gives me 37 tanks total and a full 60 points. Finally, Naval Section. Again, I want my Naval Section to give me units that I don't have yet, which is stuff like, for example, an infantry reconnaissance unit or an infantry command. Infantry commands are brought in standard transports, but if you want to do a sort of ambush area or ambush attack or try to come in from the sides, what you can do is offload these guys, take your reconnaissance helicopter, which is the Puma HC-1, offload its infantry, stuff the command infantry in that helicopter, and you have a mobile air command. So for that, I want to take any of these transports. It doesn't really matter. Let's just go with the Saxon. Other units that I want to have in here that I don't have yet. Again, these are units that should add capacity. I don't need Tomcats. I don't have an extremely long range air capacity, but I do have 2 very, very high-end airplanes in the air category. So I don't really need those. The Fox is a nice reconnaissance unit, but we already got plenty in the recon section. Other units that you might want are Gurkhas, if you're dealing with more infantry fights. On the other hand, if you are dealing with a lot of infantry fights, you might be in the wrong zone. Don't get bogged down in an infantry on infantry fight if you're using a tank deck. It's not your role. You're the main punch of a force. And if you're facing too much infantry, ask your teammates to help out with, say, a napalm tank or something like that. But the Gurkhas might be an interesting choice. So I'm just going to mark those. Milans I don't really need. These units could be... Sorry, which one was it? Yeah, the Monitor 105s. These can be used as a long-range offshore artillery battery. They're not accurate. They have a dispersion of 7.2 kilometers, which is terrible. But if used in, say, groups of 3 or 4, you're going to spend 200 points and you get an artillery battery which will pretty much never run out of ammo because it carries 200 of those shells. And if you're doing, say, a landing, which I don't think you're going to be doing with this section, or your teammate is doing a landing, you might be able to use these guys. Other units, I'm just scrolling through them quickly. What I really like is Reconnaissance Infantry. And for that, I'm going to take SBS, Special Boat Service. Special Boat Service has very good optics, of course, as most recon infantry, is fast, it's elitely trained, and it has very good stealth. They are being brought in on a Saxon, which is of course not the best transport. It does, however, have a very high off-road speed. But what my ideal situation would be is to have these guys airdropped. So again, you're going to have to improvise a helicopter to do that. But the Special Boat Service, you can offload them at a decent distance and just have them walk towards their destination. So what I'm going to do is, let's say, add 2 elite groups of those. And if you are dealing with infantry and you get the chance to use Royal Marines, go with the Royal Marines versus the Gurkhas. I'm going to quickly compare them for you so you can see why I'm making this choice. Here's the Gurkhas. And here's the Royal Marines. Gurkhas are very, very, very good infantry, don't get me wrong. But the Royal Marines can do the same thing slightly better. The reason for that is that they have this L85 assault rifle, which makes them very, very accurate at 60% versus only 30% on the Sterling submachine gun that the Gurkhas get. They both get the Mini-Me, which is a CQC weapon, so it can be used inside the same block for fighting enemy infantry. They both get the same Law 80, and they get exactly the same specs there. A difference, though, is that the Royal Marines are elitely trained versus shock trained at the Gurkhas. And let's see how many cards or how many units we get for a card. If I take the cheapest transport or the most expensive, that doesn't matter. It's 10 or 7. And unfortunately we have run out of Saxons, so that's a problem. So that's 10 or 7 versus 8 or 6 for the Royal Marines. Now if you want to get slightly cheaper Royal Marines, you can go for the base Royal Marines, but I wouldn't really recommend it. While their assault rifle or a battle rifle is more accurate, this thing is actually worse at fighting at close quarters than the L85. From bad to worse, you got, I think, the stock rifles, which are the bolt rifles. You got the battle rifles, assault rifles, and then submachine guns. That's pretty much the low to high effectiveness of close quarter weaponry. The difference is between these Royal Marines is that the Carl Gustaf has the same range, less accuracy, less armor penetration, and less rate of fire. The Royal Marines 90 can take out enemy vehicles very, very quickly. Anyway, your choice may vary, but I'm going with the Royal Marines 90 in the Stormer. The Stormer is a very fast vehicle, 80 kph off-road. We have run out of Saxons and we can take a Stalwart, but it doesn't carry any kind of armor, where this one at least has 2 points of armor. So let's take 2 cards of those. Now it's a lot of infantry, but this is infantry that does a specific role, which is anti-infantry warfare. If you have any other units that you want to get in the naval category, by all means go ahead and let me know in the comments which unit you decide to pick. Anyway, this is a deck for the US Royal Armored Company, let's call it like that, British Armored deck that I would be using. Some changes here and there. Again, your mileage may vary. You may have completely different units that you like using. You may get more tanks by lowering the veterancy. It's up to you. Whatever choice you make, be sure to test it, be sure to see what kind of effectiveness you're getting out of the units, and whether they might perform differently on different maps, and whether you want to have a specific deck of or a specific version of this deck for a specific map. Anyway, I hope you liked watching this video. I know it might be a bit confusing for me to go back to Wargame, but again, I'm still zigzagging a bit with this channel, trying to find the right groove for me, and since everybody was asking for more Red Dragon videos, here you go. I hope you enjoy. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you liked the video, and I'll see you next time.